the reality is we all are going to make an impact one way or another just because we're born. Mm-hmm. But it's up to us to decide, what do we do with it? Am I going to be just a little bitty drop, or am I going to be the hurricane? Am I going to try to bring as much as I can, or am I just going to be something that's sort of an afterthought? And that choice is based on you and the decisions you make and the actions you take right now. Not what's happened behind you, not what's about to happen in front of you, because the present is just the overlap of the past and the future right now. Mm-hmm. And this moment is the most important moment. And with what you do with that, what you believe in, and what you put your actions behind, that is what's going to dictate everything else that happens in your life. Mm-hmm. So don't worry about what's happened before. Don't say, I didn't succeed at this, or I always do this, or this is how I self-sabotage myself. That's not what we're talking about. You have a clean slate every moment.
Hey everybody, today my guest is Marcus Aurelius Anderson. Marcus is a veteran of the United States Army. While he was serving in the Army, he had a terrible injury. He burst a disc in his spine and was completely paralyzed. He died twice in the operating room, but was eventually revived and completed the surgery, but then they found out that he was still paralyzed. Through months and months of rehabilitation, Marcus regained function of his arms and legs, and he's gone on to do some amazing things that we're going to talk about today in this episode. You had this story of dying twice, and you know this other guy who's been flatlined for 17 minutes. Do you guys get together and have meetings?
That's what it was. Kenny Kane used to do stand-up comedy, and he's like, we're just going to call this the two dead guys and a comedian. And he was like, two dead guys and a comedian walk into a club. And so it was funny because my experience with death, is, as you heard, was very just like sort of singular. But for Josh, he could actually feel the blood leaving his extremities. So he could actually feel his extremities contracting. Yeah. He could feel everything moving. He felt the same sensations that I did, but just at a much, much more deep degree. And he's an incredible person. He wrote the book called The Beauty of the Darker Soul, bestseller. He's working on his PhD right now. So that's why he and I really, because you can have the intellectual component, you can have the military component, but sometimes people are just in kind of one or the other category. Mm-hmm. But he and I have just like pontificated for hours about that kind of stuff and about this kind of stuff. And that's what really brought us together, because his speaking is incredible. His story is incredible. And then that's what we have always talked about, was what is missing in leadership is empathy. What is missing is I have to be able to detect what she's doing. She has to be able to read me. So for centuries, we've had to have empathy, as even Robert Greene talked about, right?
Oh, yeah.
The necessity in the caveman days, even if we can't speak, if you see me stand up and I get a big aggressive look on my face, even if you don't know what's going on, you can tell from empathy that there's something that you need to be aware of.
Right.
Also, if you see a person who is smiling or happy or excited, again, all those things come into play. Yeah. But in today's society, we use social media to try to connect, but all of that is lost in translation. Mm-hmm. And so the ability to do what we're doing now, to actually get some sort of connection, to have a true interaction, to truly be present, as we were talking about, that's the necessity. And that's what people crave. And in leadership, people do it as well. So even if you are not the best leader, if you can be empathetic and just explain, I'm not perfect. Mm-hmm. I am not. There's no way I can be perfect. But what can I do to be a better servant to you? What can I serve? How can I serve you better? How can I lead you better? And then, as we both know from the military, you cannot lead until you learn how to follow, until you have attention to detail, until you have a checklist, until you have clarity, until you know exactly what needs to be done and in the order in which to do so. Yeah. So it's all hand in hand. And to try to do some of it segmentedly is when you get compromised results. Mm-hmm. And that's why so many people have a very fragmented style of leadership. And that's why what we're talking about is something that everybody, every time you talk to me, like, I know exactly what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. How do you do that? And it's like, I have it, and that's what we work with, but it's not something you can just have a 10-minute discussion about. It's a 3-day, a 5-day, a week-long training. And just like before, even in the idea, you have CEOs, you have C-suite executives, you have middle management, you have people on the ground. So you have to look at the motivations of each of those. The CEO looks at the bottom line. That's, for most of them, that's what they look at. The C-suite executives are usually trying to kiss up to get into the CEO's favor. So that leaves middle management, which is like your CEOs or like your officers that are actually on the ground doing the work. But lots of times there's a lack of communication there as well. Mm-hmm. And their motivation is not the same as the people that are actually have their finger on the pulse. And then you have the people that are working that, if they don't feel like they're being appreciated, listened to, it's going to be hard for them to do anything other than work for the paycheck. Mm-hmm. And that's why having a why is important. but having leadership that reinforces that why and respects the people with an empathetic form of leadership as well is absolutely key.
Yeah. And so this is what you're talking about tonight.
That's one of the things I'll be talking about tonight. And then for Murph, it'll just be basically about what we're trying to do with Memorial Day. You know, a lot of people will say, "Hey, happy Memorial Day." And we know that their heart's in the right place, but they don't understand kind of what the idea of it is.
Right.
So talking about community, talking about being on the same team, talking about why you're doing what you're doing. And I'm going to actually address the concept of, in today's society where everybody is talking about hustle and grind and no sleep, I'm actually proposing that limits are good.
Yeah.
I'm proposing that if you understand that if you can respect certain limitations, it will allow you to exceed other expectations. So you read about Parkinson's law in there, which you were probably already aware of. Having a limit of time and a very finite goal, that gives you tremendous urgency. If I know that I have to get to this point in 3 hours, there's my urgency. But even if I cut that time in half, that gives you even more urgency. And again, that's not increasing your limits, that's actually literally decreasing your limits. Understanding that we should be able to decrease our limit of bullshit that we put up with, of negative self-talk, of lack of rest, of negativity around us. But yet people don't think about that. They're just like more, push. And you have to understand that if everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority. And that if you spread yourself so thin, you will get nothing accomplished, running in circles, feeling busy without accomplishing all the things we're always aware of. But yet it's lost so often on what people are trying to do.
Yeah. You have this really rich perspective, and obviously a lot of that's informed by what you've been through. For those who don't know your story, maybe could we track it back, and could you kind of tell how you come to this, how adversity struck?
Yeah, adversity, the gift of it, huh? So for me, I had gone through different points in my life. I studied martial arts since I was a little boy. My great uncle was in special forces, a very powerful role model for me. He and my father were the biggest role models. And the beauty of it was all the principles and ethos that they both believed in dovetailed perfectly with what they were both doing, and then the martial arts. So those ideas of self-control, humility, perseverance, the stoic kind of ideal, self-respect, working hard, all those things, and honor. Having said that, going through all those things made me want to go into different directions for school. I want to go into philosophy initially, realized that I really may not be able to make much of a living out of it, then decided I want to go into criminal justice, then decided I want to go into chiropractic school after I was injured. I had an injury in my shoulder, preparing for a fight, and a chiropractor saw me in the gym trying to laboriously lift my arm. And he's like, "How long has that hurt?" I said, "For a while, but why do you care?" And he gave me his card. I was like, "Oh, a chiropractor. Smoke and mirrors. He's a witch doctor, right?"
Right. I used to intern for a chiropractor.
Yeah, so you
understand.
know. And he says, "Come see me Monday, and if I don't help you, you don't have to pay me." I was like, "I'll see you Monday, doc." So we go in. He adjusts my spine, takes X-rays, does a great physical and history, and then he's able to. My shoulder was anterior and inferior, so he sets it, and then boom, and it just sounds like a gun going off. And I have probably about 80% range of motion almost immediately. The pain decreased tremendously. And I'm like, "Okay, what did you do and how did you know how to do that?" And he says, "Well, I'm getting ready to go to lunch. Well, let's have a discussion." We start talking, and the holistic mentality of chiropractic about the body healing itself, and the power that makes the body allows us the capacity to recover, that made a lot of sense to me. It was very much in that ethos of yin yang and respect and Taoism and Zen and martial art philosophy. And he said, you would be perfect for this. It's like, wow, okay, so is it like a weekend seminar? He says, no, it's a doctorate. And so doing criminal justice is kind of one direction, and then having to drop all that and go the other direction into general chemistry and human anatomy and all that. It was a big step back, but in my mind, if what I'm trying to work towards is worthy of that, I'm not afraid to take one step back to take huge steps forward in the future. So started going to chiropractic school in Kansas City, liked the school, but didn't really, the way that they taught the philosophy didn't resonate with me. And so there were a lot of people that were telling me go to the chiropractic school in Life University in Atlanta. And it's a tremendous school, huge, fantastic faculty, great people there, great school, great curriculum. But even going there, I lost almost 2 years of school. But again, it was worth the investment in my mind. At this point, I'm also married, and For me, what happened was we talk about priorities all the time, and what I did is I prioritized the wrong thing. I prioritized school, and then I also prioritized work. So I was doing 25 hours of school, doctorate level courses, and then I was also working 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
And in so doing, I was neglecting my relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I assumed that because we were married that I didn't really have to cultivate that or feed that, and that was my mistake. So that marriage fell apart in the midst of a lot of the hardship between school and everything. And then about 10 days after that, I get a phone call, and it's my dad, and he's like, Uncle Ronnie's sick, come home. And so that was a pretty devastating 1-2 punch, because by the time I got back, my uncle had already passed. So got to be a pallbearer. And the whole time I'm there, I'm trying to have that resilience, that mentality of, of my uncle being strong, being stoic. You read the book about being in the hunting blind, and am I cold? And he's just standing there like, it's no big deal. So I'm trying to think of that in my mind. And then there's a full bird colonel that comes in and eulogizes him. Wow. And then person after person that's on his team talking about all these incredible acts of just valor and selfless service. And I'm just finally beginning to get a true gravity of what he was and what he did and how he was able to impact people with his movement. And I was really in awe. And then I'm good until they start playing taps. Yeah. And they start folding the flag, and they start making the triangle, and they tuck it in neatly and uniformly, and they hand it to my great aunt, and they say, thank you for your sacrifice. We're sorry for your loss. And I just lose it, So I kind of fall apart, and I'm trying to be strong for everybody, and I realize that, you can't always do that. So, excuse me. But the great thing was, it helped me understand. So for me, I'm 38 years old at that point, divorced, no kids, nothing holding me back. I'd always wanted to join the military. I always had an excuse not to join the military. And so I thought, you know what? This is my time. Here's my window. I'll go talk to a recruiter, see if I can get in the Army. Go talk to him, walk in, ask him what the age limit is. He says 35. I say I'm 38. I go to turn on my heel. He says, well, come and talk to me. And I'm very matter of fact and say, if you're going to waste my time, I'm not going to talk to you. But he said, well, explain to me, what's this motivation? Why are you joining at this age? And I explained to him what we just talked about. Yeah. And then he asked me, well, are you smart? And I said, well, I don't know. I'm 38 years old and I'm talking to an Army recruiter. You tell me if I'm smart or not. But I take an ASVAB. I do well because I already have a degree in doctorate level courses. He asked me if I'm in shape, how many push-ups I can do. I don't know. I don't really do push-ups for fun. I max the push-ups out. I max out between the PT test and the ASVAB, I'm like at the very top. Yeah. And he says, okay. He says, so, you're exactly what the military is looking for. And he goes on and shows me, dossier and video clip after video clip of the great thing about the Army is you can decide what you do, and you pick your MOS and whatever you want to do. And you could do this job where you're in security, and you could take that translation directly from the military into the civilian sector, start making 6 digits and blah, 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 blah. And I'm just kind of letting him talk for a little bit. And then finally said, I know what I want to do. He says, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, infantry. And he kind of double takes. He's like, you don't get it. You can do whatever you want, Anderson. And he just continues to talk to me. And finally I just said, Sergeant, you don't get it. This is what I want. And if I cannot get this, I'm going to walk out the door. And we go back and forth over and over again. He explains to me, the infantry is the most difficult job. Mm-hmm. The infantry is what they give people that are not smart, that are not, necessarily the most physically fit. I said, well, this is why I'm doing this. This is my motivation. And he says, you have a degree. He said, we could put you in OCS school, Officer Candidate School. And I said, would I be guaranteed to get infantry? He said, well, no, you'd have to compete to be at the very top of your class. He said, so there's no guarantee. And I said, so if I go enlisted, there is a guarantee that I'll be infantry. And he said, yeah. He says, but you're also guaranteed the most hardship. And I said, let's do it. And he continues to examine and explain to me and hold my hand and talk to me like I'm 4. And I said, this is it. So finally he signs the release and slides it over, and he says, man, it's your life. And 6 months later, I'm getting off the bus at Fort Benning, getting yelled at by drill sergeants that are younger than me, competing against guys that are half my age. And there's a part of me that's like, man, did I make a mistake? The 6 months leading up to that, I trained as hard as I could because there was like in shape, and then there's like military shape. And then the same thing with the intelligence. I was studying the Ranger Handbook. I was trying to study as much as I could to give myself an advantage, because I know that once we're in the heat of it, I'm not going to have a whole lot of cognitive capacity. I know that there's going to sleep and water and rest are going to be few and far between. So I went in with this mentality that was going to be almost like Full Metal Jacket. And it wasn't quite to that point, but with that expectation, that allowed me to do okay. And I knew that if I could just get through the first couple of weeks, like if my body wouldn't let me down, I knew that my mindset could push me through. And the advantage that I had was that I was 38 and all these guys are 19 or 20. So they'd never left home before.
Right.
So if you take the phone away from a 19-year-old right now and tell him you can't get on social media, you can't text people, you can't get on Snap. And by the way, you're not going to get this thing back for the next 4 months. Oh, by the way, you haven't slept outside of your own home before? Well, we're throwing you in a big bay with a bunch of guys on a bunk bed, and don't really worry about it too much because you're not going to be getting a lot of sleep. And throwing him into this chaos, the beauty was I had some life experience and they did not.
Right.
So, and again, these are guys that are breaking their ankles on ruck marches. These are guys that are falling when we're learning to jump, that are dislocating their shoulders, actually fracturing their hips because they're not prepared for the impact, right? But because I prepared and because I had a lifetime of training, in a lot of ways, that was my biggest advantage.
Yeah.
So once I got to that point where I realized, okay, this is just a game and I'm just going to give myself over to this entirely. Once I stopped resisting, that's when I really started to flourish. And I got through infantry school, didn't have to recycle, which I was very happy about. Got stationed with my unit, and then the real training began, because infantry school is difficult, but it's nothing compared to when you get to a unit that is, because as soon as I got to 10th Mountain to Fort Drum in upstate New York, we are told, listen, be prepared to pack your trash, we're going to be going soon. And at that point, 10th Mountain was the most deployed unit in the history of the military. Between Operation Anaconda, Black Hawk Down, all these things were there. There's a lot of history behind that.
Right.
I got to train with some of the best soldiers in the world in my mind. There were people that were like literally giving up Ranger School to come to 10th Mountain because they wanted to deploy with this unit because of all of the history. Yeah. And so I got to train with some of the best people in the world, and going from infantry school directly into a training rotation to deploy, the intensity is already high, but then they click it up even more. Yeah. And what happened was they kept pushing our deployment back because that's the reality of living your life as a political football, as it were. And so
I've never heard that before, but I like it.
That's what it is. I mean, because you're serving. You serve the president. Yeah. President Obama was the president. He's he's the commander in chief. So whatever he says is what happens. So we're like, okay, so when you have more time to prepare, as you know, it doesn't mean you slow down. It means you click up. It means you push harder. It means you ask more. It means you demand more. So now we have an extra 3 months. We have an extra 6 months. Okay, when you guys come back from block leave, we're going to be hitting the ground and we're going to shoot Haji in the face. You got to get ready for this. But they kept pushing it back. So in 2012, in the winter, I'm starting to have some symptoms. I'm starting to have numbness in my hands and my feet. But I attribute that to being cold. Yeah. It's negative 20 degrees outside. You're in Fort Drum, upstate New York. You're outside for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. You're in the snow. You're not getting a lot of sleep or rest. I just thought that was part of it. You're carrying 100 pounds on your back. That's part of it. But then I noticed that my run time was suffering. I noticed that I was having a hard time holding on to the rope when we would try to rope, or whenever we would do pull-ups even. And I've always had a very strong grip, so that was something that was discouraging. But again, with that mentality, with that soldier's ideal, you just push everything down. Yeah. And you just push through, because, especially for me, because that was a hell of a motivation. This is what I was preparing my entire life for, was this deployment. I know that other men's lives are in my hands. I know that if I'm not squared away, if I don't have everything buttoned up, that their lives are in danger because of me, and vice versa. So that is a lot of responsibility, and it gives you a lot of motivation. But as things continued on, in 2012 I woke up one morning and I tried to roll out of bed. And my neck would articulate a little bit, but the rest of my body wouldn't. And there's a part of me that was like, because I'm 40 years old at that point, almost, and my body, I'm kind of laughing at myself, all the old man sore, and it wouldn't move. And that's when the chiropractic training came in, because I was a year and a half away from my doctorate. So I do a pretty quick eval of myself, and I realize, okay, either this is something temporary and it will, take care of itself quickly, or this is a serious neurological issue, and I'm in a lot of trouble. And it was the latter of the two. Luckily for me, there was somebody that was going to be knocking on the door anyway that morning for an AAR. So when they knock on the door, I just yell through, like, I can't move. And as you can imagine, I'm not the guy that would mess around when it comes to something like that. So they get the door in, they get me there, and realize that I'm really hurt, and we're on our way to the hospital. And that's when everything really starts to kind of go sideways.
So what happened in the hospital then?
So in the hospital, it's just like the movies, for better or for worse. They have you on a gurney and they're running, and there's an army of people with you, and they're poking and prodding you like you're not there, and they're talking about you like you're not there, and they're trying to do all these little tests on you. They're running me to the MRI to see what's going on. And it's going to sound dumb, but even then, the soldier in me was thinking, man, I hope this doesn't take very long. I hope that they can just give me a shot and give me some physical therapy and let me out the door, because we're deploying and my guys are counting on me, and I can't. But once we got in the MRI, and once I could see kind of the way everybody was reacting, I knew there was something bad. We go in the holding room, and they come back out and they say, well, we're going to get you prepped. And I'm like, prep for what? And they said, for surgery, dumbass. So that's a big, like, waking up paralyzed and then being told that you're getting ready to go under the knife. And I was even asking, I said, is there a way that we can just avoid that? Right. And I said, listen, you see how you're having a hard time breathing? You're having a labored breath because your body is not communicating from this nerve root down. You have to do this or you're going to die.
Right. And with your training, you know what that means.
I absolutely do. And it was at C5, so it was the same vertebral level where Christopher Reeve was paralyzed. So I'm understanding that it's something big. They told me what it is. So as we're going down to the operating room, there's a person there that tells me what's going on, and I say, oh, well, so you're going to do a discectomy, you're going to remove all the disc, you're going to, fuse my vertebra, they're going to completely ankylose, which I'm using medical terminology because I knew what it was, and they were like, how do you know that? I was like, just tell me what's going on. And so I said, oh, so once you remove all that impingement, I should be good. Silence. And that's not what you want to hear when your entire life has literally been wrapped up in your physicality. And they say, let's not worry about that right now. Let's just get through the surgery and we'll worry about that later. That's not what I want to hear. I start getting scared. I start getting angry. And they said, listen, the reality is you don't have any other choice right now. And all you can do is just try to relax, and we'll see you on the other side. So they put the anesthesia over me. I start counting down from 100. I get to about 98. And for me, all there was it's just very dark and very cold. And I felt like I was there for an instant, but I felt like I was there for an eternity. And then I wake up in the ICU, and the nurse is like, welcome back to the land of the living. I don't really understand what she means. At this point, I'm still paralyzed. I'm in a neck brace. So what movement I did have is completely arrested. Surgeon comes down, sits at the foot of the bed, and he kind of looks up at me, and he's kind of chuckles nervously, and he says, well, you had us nervous there, Mr. Anderson. We lost you. And my throat at this point, and I realize now that they were jamming all kinds of stuff down my throat to try to bring me back. And that's why my throat's so raw, because I can't even really speak at that point. He said, don't worry about trying to talk. He said, but you flatlined, and we lost you twice. And we didn't know if we were going to get you back the second time. So you're really, really lucky to be alive. And he had a very congratulatory tone. So, I felt pretty good about that. And he said, the good news is you live to tell the tale. The bad news is this is what you're left with. And this is your reality. So try to start wrapping your mind around that. He says, I do not even want to give you the option of hope because I know that will just make you very angry. He said, if you are going to walk, it would happen today or tomorrow. He said, but there is so much neurological damage to your body that you can't even really hope for that to happen. So just try to get some rest, and they'll come and get you, collect you for your unit in about a week. So of course the soldier in me comes out, and he leaves, and I'm in denial. I don't believe him.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, if he's correct and I died, this whole walking thing shouldn't be a big deal. And night turned into day, day turned into night, and no movement, nothing, nothing's improving. And that's when I'm realizing, okay, this is serious. And then by the time they bring me back and take me to my unit, that's when it becomes abundantly obvious that this is not something that I can just hope will go away. This is something that I have to address. And what do I do now? What do I do with my life? I've put all my eggs in this basket. And so for me, when most people are 40 years old, looking back on their lives and their family and their relationships and their incredible career and their home, I'm 40 at that point. I turned 40 in the bed, broke, divorced, bedridden, paralyzed, figuring out, what do I do now? Where do I go?
This was your 40th birthday.
That week was my 40th birthday.
Wow.
So it was very sobering.
Yeah.
And that was when I started realizing that I had to do something. So the series of acceptance is difficult, obviously. I was in denial at first, and then I just went through just incredible anger. I was livid. I was projecting it to everyone around me, but I was angry at myself because I realized that I had wasted so much time, so much potential, so much intelligence, so many ways I could have helped other people, that I could have helped myself. There was so much more I could have done. But like all of us, especially when you're younger, your entire life you've had youth. So you assume that you will always have that. And in this life, people always say you don't know what you got till it's gone, but that's not true. We know what we have, but we assume that we will always have it. And that's when that brutal reality hit me. I realized that, wow, what am I going to do with this? How do I deal with this? So that anger that I had that was directed outwards was directed inwards. So now I go into this depression. I'm literally suicidal at this point. I'm literally trying to figure out, how do I take my own life? And I'm really realizing that I can't do that I can't ask a buddy to come in and try to do something like that for me, even though, I know that sounds morbid, but that's the reality. And I'm trying to figure out, what do I do? And I was just completely angry at everyone and everything for 3 months. Yeah. And when you're there like that and they prop you up and they let you, they turn on Netflix and they leave the room. That's why I kind of have that disdain for binging on Netflix. Nothing against Netflix, but it's just a way to kind of numb yourself, and that's not what I wanted. Yeah. So I would just tell them, just turn off the lights, just leave me alone, just leave the lights off. Let me figure this out. And I started going, and the thing was, like, all this philosophy, all these ideals, every book I'd read about the Tao Te Ching, stuff about Zen, Taoism, every philosophy story that I could think of was coming to my mind. And it sounds great when you're not in it. But when you're in hardship, when you're facing adversity, it just sounds like a bunch of flowery bullshit, because it's not helping you. It's like, that's easy for you to say because you're not in this. So it's easy for me to be philosophical about somebody else's headache. But when it's my own, all of a sudden, it's different because it's mine. I want to be the exception to the rule. I don't want to be the one that has to face it. And that's where the difficulty lies. So what I did was I tried to find something. And in Zen, they say that if all else fails in your life, be grateful for your breath. And for me, I really had a hard time even doing that, because I didn't feel like I was living, I was existing. And that was where a lot of that anger came from, that resentment for what I had taken for granted. What I ended up doing eventually was I had to find something to counteract all the anger. Yeah. And for most people, the opposite of anger is love. But the reality was I didn't have a lot of love around me, and that was my own fault. So I had to find the next best thing, and the closest thing to that for me was not love, but it was like unconditional love. So if you think about somebody that you love unconditionally, you may not love them all the time. You might not like them all the time. You may not like what they do. You may be angry with them, but yet you still love them.
Yeah.
That's what unconditional love is. So for me, I found genuine unconditional gratitude. I hate to use the word because it's not that I hate it. It's just there's a lot of connotations attached to it that are very buzzword and very, woo-woo, and I write in a journal, and that's fine. But to me, a lot of people are not doing gratitude correctly. They are not being grateful. To me, gratitude it's a verb. It's something that you do. If I'm grateful for you, I treat you with respect. I treat you with love. I treat you with empathy because I'm grateful for you.
Yeah.
If I'm grateful for the people around me, I act in that manner. I don't even have to tell you, but you can sense it. Much in the same way that if you're pissed off at somebody or somebody's mad at you, you don't have to walk up to them and say, "Are you mad at me?" It's obvious.
Yeah,
They don't have to bump you in the shoulder as they walk by you in the hall, but yet it's abundantly obvious. So for me, a lot of people look at gratitude as this thing where they pick out the stuff in their life that they like. I'm grateful for this thing, I'm grateful for this thing, and I'm grateful for this thing, and I'm grateful for this person. Everything else in my life, though, but I'm grateful. They have a very passive, defeated mentality about it. So you'll see people that will literally have their lives falling apart in front of them, and yet they'll just sit on their hands and say, "Oh, but I'm grateful," and it's a very, it's almost a victim mentality, and I hate that because I had the victim mentality for a long time when I was injured. So I said all that to say this: unconditional gratitude is the ability to see an opportunity within anything. So if you can find opportunity within adversity, if you can find the opportunity within chaos, if you're willing to stay proximal to it enough to understand that there is a lesson in this, there's a reason why I'm going through this, and it's shining a light on a weakness, it's showing me an opportunity where I can get better, it's showing me a hole in my game, it's a chink in my armor. If you can look at it like that, you will never be a victim. You will always be grateful, and you will always find gratitude in that adversity. But if you do not, you will stay, and that will be your limit. That will be your ceiling, and you will never get beyond that. And that's why we see people, there are a lot of symptomatologies to it, but the people that you see that hate Monday and love Friday, the people that are on social media about how mad they are at the barista, or how mad they are at the person that cut them off in traffic, or how the weather won't cooperate, those are the people that they're usually kind of embracing that in a lot of ways. Some people play the victim so well that they should actually be carrying around body chalk with them because they love the identity and the amount of attention that they get from it. And that's not what it should be. So for me, and I had a lot of time to think about this. So just in the same way that I took myself out of the idea of my breath, one night I just thought, okay, is there anyone on this earth that was able to gain something from my injury? Even not me, anybody. So I took myself out of the equation. And when I did that, I was like, wait a minute. This injury in my mind would have happened no matter where I was on the globe. So if I was in Afghanistan, if I was in Iraq, if I was in the US, it was inevitable. So I thought, well, if I'd have been deployed and I had my team with me, because every man that's injured, for one that's injured, it takes at least two to pull him to safety.
Right.
So that means my team is compromised. That means now my squad has to cover down and they're compromised. That also means that the Chinook helicopter that flies in is a big target.
Right.
They're going into a hot zone. They have a medical team on there for me.
Right.
When I was able to actually self-audit, I could itemize that there were about 12 to 20 other people whose lives would have been put in harm's way if I'd have suffered that injury while I was deployed.
Yeah.
And for the first time in my life, I believe, that's when I had unconditional gratitude. And I literally said, wow, I'm lucky.
Yeah.
Like I looked around the room after I said, because I couldn't believe I was saying it. But that was that's when I just broke down, tears poured down my face.
Yeah.
And I just felt this almost relief, because now there was, we search for reasons and purpose behind what happens to us. But most of the time we cannot find that until after the fact.
Yes.
When we're close to it, it's hard.
Yes.
It's very hard, because human nature is, once I face something difficult, my natural inclination is to get as far away from myself as I can, put as much distance between myself and that hardship as I can. So whether it be adversity, whether it be trauma, whether it be addiction, it's there. And most people just want to turn a blind eye, put their fingers in their ears and act like it didn't happen. But when you do that, you lose a huge opportunity to figure out why it happened, to figure out what did you gain from that. While this wound is open, let's examine it. And if you do that, you can gain a lot of knowledge about yourself, but more importantly, you can gain knowledge that you can give to other people.
Yeah.
And that's why it's hard. And most people will not voluntarily go into that place. I mean, I didn't.
No.
I didn't. There's no way. There's no other time in my life I would have taken 3 months just to do some brutal self-searching. So that's what it was for me. And then once I had like that genuine gratitude as a cornerstone, I was able to slowly build on it.
Yeah. It seems that this gratitude idea is the sort of the mirror of your thesis on adversity.
It absolutely is. For me, it's a trifecta of adversity breeds that gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
And then to me, if you go through adversity and you learn the lesson well enough, you'll learn gratitude. But the more important lesson that you learn is empathy.
Okay.
Because if you've ever fallen down before and somebody's helped you up, you remember how grateful you were for that person helping you.
Yeah.
And if you've ever fallen down before and you see somebody that's down, you remember what it was like to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can learn that lesson from adversity, you will be more empathetic. You will have more gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
And that becomes that triangle where now it all connects.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can find empathy, gratitude, or within all your adversity in any point in your life, they will all chain. And then you can find opportunity within that. But if you don't, you'll be stuck in one and not the other. And again, it's easy to expect empathy if you're the guy that fell down. But if you do not breed it out, it's hard for you to, you shouldn't expect it if you're not going to be the one that gives it back. And that's where it becomes very difficult. So that was the big turning point for me, because a week after I started having like that genuine gratitude, that unconditional gratitude, I became grateful for the sun coming through the window and the bed that I may never be able to get out of. And a week after I started seeing the adversity as a gift instead of a curse, I started getting a little bit of feeling back in my hands.
It was really that linked in the timeline, but it was a week after?
It was a week after.
Wow.
And it wasn't much, but it was just enough to give me hope, just enough to give me a little bit of belief.
Right, because that was not the diagnosis.
That was not the diagnosis.
Yeah.
And as you know in the book, then I kind of went back to hubris. I was like, see, I knew I could do it. Yeah, see, I knew I could do this. And it came, and then it went.
Right, your path wasn't linear. It wasn't this perfect upward trajectory.
It's just like entrepreneurship and anything else. Mm-hmm. It feels like it's going up. And then when the nurse would come in, I would try to show her. She's like, yeah, whatever. And then she'd leave. And that's not their fault, because they see that all the time. But then I went back to the place where I was like angry again. But I went through the whole cycle. I thought, well, this is what helped me before. Mm-hmm. And when you're that desperate, you will think anything. You will believe anything. You will try anything to give you any kind of potential to recover. So I went back to that place again, and I started getting a little bit more movement. I started getting movement back again. It became very little, and then got a little bit more. And then eventually, once they saw that there was potential, that's whenever physical therapy, occupational therapy, and a year and a half afterwards, I'm to the point where I could actually move around, take care of myself. And that's when it's interesting, because that was a huge hardship to get through. But in some ways, it was almost harder after, because I had all these brutal lessons. I promised myself as I lay in that bed that if I ever got out of it again, if I was ever given a second chance, that I would never hesitate, that I would never compromise, and I would go out and just give this to as many people as I could. And so I was 180 pounds, really great shape in the military. I get out, I'm 230 pounds, I'm way overweight, I lost a bunch of muscle. My hormones are all messed up because of the medication I'm on. And I'm like, okay, now what? Yeah. Because part of me wanted to go back into that old familiar mindset of, well, you have this much school stuff, you can go and be like a medical dosimetrist or go into these different directions, and you can make, 6 figures, which seems to be the magic number for people for whatever reason. I was like, I just don't want to do that. There's so much has happened to me. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to just let this go away and let this become a memory. So what I did is I went back to my first love, which is martial arts. I've got different teaching certificates. I have different black belts. So I went back to learning how to hold a blade, learning how to punch and kick, learning how to roll on the ground in jiu-jitsu, learning how to swing a sword, how to swing a stick, how to move, how to grapple.
And how does that go for you? Do you feel like you're learning it in a new body?
I do, and it's all about just holding a blade and just doing a very simple cut stroke. Because when I'm first doing it, it's not synchronized.
This is something that you'd learned years before.
Right. So I'm trying to get that muscle memory back. I'm trying to get that dexterous capacity, that muscle memory. But that was one of the best forms of physical therapy that I could possibly have.
Sure.
Because going back to that gave me, you have to have the intent. You have to have precision. You have to know exactly where the blade is going and where do I transition if that doesn't work, and what does this energy do to me here if I pull it around. So understanding all that was the integration that I really, really needed. And luckily I had a friend who I've known for years. He certified me in a martial art a long time before that. And he was the one that gave me the big brother, the kick in the ass that I needed. And I can't thank him enough. His name's Liddell Elliott. And he said, I came down and told him what happened. He found out. We went to lunch, and he has his studio there. He's like, well, come on in here and let's hit the mitts or let's move around. I was like, dude, come on. And he's like, no, I just want to see what you can do. And, I'm throwing it out there, and in my mind, it looks real sloppy and stuff. And I'm sure it was, but he kind of was like, he's like, okay, I'll see you Tuesday. And of course, at this point, I don't have a job. I've literally just come back sort of home to kind of get my feet back underneath me. I'm like, well, I don't know if I want to be here Tuesday. He's like, well, you're teaching class, so figure it out. And that's what I needed. I needed that adversity to give me a deadline, to give me something. And of course, I had a wealth of knowledge and I could teach a class, but it was more not about being afraid to teach a class, but that I was going to have to perform these techniques in front of people that didn't know me, and that I was being put on the spot. And there were like 15 people at the class, but it felt like I was given a keynote, like the first time I, talked in front of a bunch of people. But it gave me direction. It gave me something specific. It gave me a task. It gave me a metrics in which I had to measure myself. And that's what I needed. Yeah. And from there, I eventually luckily I got some students that were private students that wanted to learn. And I had one student who was very wealthy and very nice to me. And we would go to lunch after we would have our lesson. I teach him twice a week. And we would always talk about, his job or his business, because he owned a business, or his family. And invariably, I was always able to bring a lesson, a concept that we had just talked about, and then apply it to his situation. And because the truth is ubiquitous, it is overarching. It's in everything if we're able to recognize it. Right. So for him, we did this for a few months, and one day he says, I'm paying a business coach a lot of money to help me, and you're giving me more like applicable value than what he is. And so I joked, and I was like, well, just write me a check, whatever you want to do. And he gets up to go to the restroom. He goes out to his car, he writes me a check for 6 months worth of training and just slides it over. Wow. He's like, so how do you want to do this? And I'm just kind of like, that seemed like a lot of money to me at that point. And he says, do you want to just do what we've been doing? I was like, yeah, that's fine. I'll throw in the martial art lessons for free. And that was my first coaching client. He gave me referred me more people that are in that tax bracket. All of a sudden I have coaching clients that I didn't know I knew it could help people, but I didn't know how. And for some people, the knowledge would help them in business. For some people, they had the business squared away, but they had that CEO mentality that does not translate well to a relationship, to a family. And so we would work on that part of it for them. And there's really no work-life balance. There's not. Yeah. There is a blend if you're able to do it. And that's what I kind of work with them on. And then all of a sudden they say, hey, so-and-so's having this event. I didn't know what they meant. What by event, they just meant a gathering, I thought. And they said they'd like for you to come and tell your story. Yeah. Okay. I didn't know what that really entailed. So I went up there for about half an hour, told my story. They did Q&A for half an hour after that. And then they wrote me a check. Wow. And I was like, I can't take that. They said, you're the keynote speaker. We paid the keynote speaker $2,000, just take it. And, so this is what you're in business. Coaching, speaking, more speaking events like that. And then the book came from, there was a woman that waited around. She had been pacing near the end of the back of the room, waiting for everybody to be done to talk to me. Older woman. And she comes up and she says, I want to buy your book. I don't have a book.
Mm-hmm.
What? And she looks at me and she's like, I want to buy your book. And it felt like she was almost scolding me.
Yeah.
She said, my granddaughter is going through a huge hardship right now. And I want her to hear your story. And there is no way I can give that to her. I can tell her what happened, but the way you say it, the verbiage that you use, the emotion that you have, that's what I want her to have.
Mm-hmm.
So how can I give that to her?
Mm.
You don't have a book? So they say that if we listen to our audience enough, if we listen to the people we serve, they will tell us what they want.
Yeah.
So I started writing the book, but the beauty of it was, for me, that book was incredibly cathartic.
Mm-hmm.
I took 1 year and 3 months to write it, but it made me really, really, because like I said before, I was trying to run away from my hardship.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to act like it didn't happen. And when I would tell people about it in a very kind of like sheepish way, you know, they're blown away by it, but I didn't want that to be their definition of what I was.
Mm.
There's so much more to me. I'm much more multifaceted than just a guy who was hurt or died or whatever. That's not what I wanted people to think about. Having said that, I also understood that the experience in my life makes me uniquely qualified to help people in a certain manner.
Yeah.
And now I feel like this huge responsibility to share that with people and to give that to them, and to give them something that's simple and pragmatic, that's applicable, because so many people try to muddy the water to make it seem deep, as Nietzsche would say, because they want to make it more complex than it has to be. But if you look at Einstein, he knew his subject so well that he could knock it down to just E=mc², make it very simplistic.
Right.
And that's what it has to be, because when you're in the heat of adversity, when you're in the fray, you don't have the luxury of being philosophical.
Mm-hmm.
You do not have the capacity, once the adrenaline dumps into your body, to think at a higher level. Your cognition is out the window. You're just like fine motor skills at that point. So if you cannot intellectually be equipped with this before you get into it, you will probably be victimized. And that's why I try to talk about that now, because if you can have this put now into your psyche before you get into it, now when you reach it, you'll at least have a fighting chance to understand, where am I going with this? What should I get from this? Because for most of us, like I say, they ask, why is this happening to me? I'm a good person. Why does this stuff happen to me? Why do good people get, hurt and bad people are able to do whatever they want? And the problem is, you're taking your eye off the ball. That's not what this is about. This is about you, not about what you've done, but about what you need to be doing now. What are you going to do with this stimuli? Viktor Frankl talks about it, the idea of between stimulus and response, there is that responsibility, that choice. And in every moment, you can choose how you decide to look at this. And everything that happens to you either empowers you or takes your power from you. And once you allow that to happen, that becomes a cycle. And then that one decision to be a victim, that one decision to compromise, bleeds over into everything else you do in your life. And now you compromise on your integrity, you compromise on your diet, you compromise on your spouse, you compromise on your business, and you find yourself stuck in this place of sliding through the misery of mediocrity. You're not doing enough, but you're doing more than the people around you, and you're doing just enough to get by.
Yeah.
And misery loves company, but not as much as mediocrity. And that's the reality.
I love that.
And that's, so many people are living that life of quiet desperation. They're just allowing things to happen to them. And again, they're more concerned about Game of Thrones or Netflix than they are about what really is important in their life. And the reality is, we all have priorities, whether we realize it or not. And people think that they have to have a whiteboard that says, this is my priority, boom. But your priority is what you do every day, what you bleed into, what you pour into, what you decide to do. So if you say that your priority is to be in shape, but you're not, and you're not working out, and you're not eating the right kind of food, clearly you're claiming that that's something, but that's just a wish, and that's not going to get you anywhere.
Right. But one look at you, I know you prioritize that. Whether you've got a whiteboard or a card in your pocket that says it, it shows.
That's the idea. Yeah. And for me, that's what it was. I never take my physicality for granted now, because it was taken from me so quickly. And for better or for worse, as a man, we base our occupation as sort of our identity. So for me, I went from this place of like this, I don't want to say superhuman, but like this soldier that was able to do stuff that I never thought even possible. Yeah. To a point where I
light infantry carrying half your body weight.
Yeah. It's insane. And then going from that to not even being able to take care of yourself. So again, I will never take those things for granted. I will never take, again, being present for granted. I will never take opportunities to do things to help people for granted. And if that's what it comes down to, then I'm absolutely happy to do that, because if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority, like we were saying before. And so many people think that if they prioritize one thing for like a couple of months, that's enough. But honestly, you're just starting to begin to scratch the surface if you do that. It gives you just a taste of what you're truly capable of. And there is no better stimuli to do that to push you forward than adversity. Yeah. And we can do it on our own, but most of us as human beings will not. And I'm the same way. So that's why we have to go through now. And so now what I do is I try to use adversity as a catalyst and as a compass. So now I allow that to direct me, to dictate what I'm going to do next. If I don't feel like doing burpee box jumps in sprints, I probably need to do them. You know.
You say that you feel that you have a responsibility now. What is that relationship between adversity and responsibility?
To me, it comes down to empathy and gratitude. It's the same thing. To me, responsibility is the physical ability to take what I've done and act in a grateful manner. So when you see somebody going through hardship, it may be something as simple as smiling at somebody or opening the door or asking or like looking at them when you're at the checkout and say, how are you doing? How's your day? You don't have to like be weird or creepy about it, but just that connection alone may be enough to give that person something. And then of course, if it's somebody you do care about or somebody you do know, doing more is obviously more important for those people to give that to them. And the thing is, we all have knowledge that we can help other people with if we think about it. And so that's why I'm very much the proponent of absorbing truth irrespective of source. And that's hard for people because we have to suspend our belief and our prejudice and our ideals in order to absorb that. So in the book, I talk about it where there may be a person politically that you don't agree with, but they may say something that is powerful. So do I take this truth that is so obvious and then just throw it out and say, well, because this person said it because they're on this side of the aisle or they're this religion or their lack of religion or whatever it is, I'm not going to take that. That's arrogance. That's ego. That's stupid. That's not going to help me. But more importantly, even if it's not something that will help me, it may help somebody else. It may help you. So how can I dare not absorb as much as I can and give it to somebody if I can do that? So again, that responsibility is where I'm at now, where if I truly am grateful, I will be telling as many people as I can, screaming it from the rooftops, you know, whether it be speaking in a podcast, in a book, coaching, whatever it is. That's the idea. And people talk about making a ripple. They talk about impact. To me, impact is, the very definition of it is, it's not really a ripple per se. It's actually creating so much of a change in one person that their behavior changes and it affects the behavior and changes it around the people behind them. So it continues on and on. So it's not a ripple, it's a tsunami of a positive change. And that's what it has to be. Because you have to attack it with that kind of intensity, because if you don't, the thing that you think is a ripple will just be a drop. And the reality is, we all are going to make an impact one way or another just because we're born. But it's up to us to decide, what do we do with it? Am I going to be just a little bitty drop? Or am I going to be the hurricane? Am I going to try to bring as much as I can? Or am I just going to be something that's sort of an afterthought? And that choice is based on you and the decisions you make and the actions you take right now. Not what's happened behind you, not what's about to happen in front of you, because the present is just the overlap of the past and the future right now. And this moment is the most important moment. And with what you do with that, what you believe in, and what you put your actions behind, that is what's going to dictate everything else that happens in your life. So don't worry about what's happened before. Don't say, I didn't succeed at this, or I always do this, or this is how I self-sabotage myself. That's not what we're talking about. You have a clean slate every moment, if you so choose. It's just that most people allow their past behaviors to become their present. And I'm telling you now that if you can hear us, act, do something, do what needs to be done. All the stuff that you act like you don't want to do, the answer that you're looking for is hidden in the adversity that you're avoiding. Everything that you were trying to ask people to help you with, you will find if you push forward and fall down, and then wipe yourself off and look in the mirror and realize, I'm not made out of glass. I'm a little stronger than I thought it was. And then you realize it wasn't as bad as you thought it was. And then you do it again. And that builds resilience.
So how do you catalyze people when they come to you and they say, hey, Marcus, I'm dealing with this thing, and I know that you're a man who's been through adversity. I want to get out of this, but at the moment they're still really stuck. Is there a small win? Like the guy on your podcast talked about how he used to clean his prison cell.
Yeah.
Is it something like that, or do you have another way?
There are different techniques and tactics, but a lot of it just, I have to talk to that person first and see where they're at. Because the way I try to help people is I treat them with love and respect, but I kick them in the ass and I call them on their bullshit when they're not doing the work.
Yeah.
And that's what it has to be. So I can see where they're at. And lots of times you can ask them, it's like, it can be this simple. Where are you right now? Where would you like to be? And what is the excuse that you're tolerating that allows you to get from here to there? And that sounds simple, but if you can do that and say, well, I'm at this weight, or I'm making this amount of money, or I'm at this point in my relationship, and I want to be over here, there's a gap. And that gap is where the work is. Chances are anybody that's listening that is working on something that acts like you don't know what's going on, there is stuff that you know you're allowing. There's stuff that you are setting yourself up for, and you know it. If I put a gun to your head, you'd be like, yeah, that's probably right. That's the thing that you should be working towards. That's the thing that you should be kicking yourself in the ass about. Whether it be a person who is saying that they're trying to get in shape, but they buy a bunch of junk food at the store anyway, and they leave it in the house. You're like, you're setting yourself up to fail, right? Or the person that claims that they're going to do this, but they don't do it. That's why when a person gets a trainer or a coach, now they're committed because they've already put skin in the game. And now when they have money, because if it's just, I mean, I can help anybody anyway, but if it's just a person who wants help, that's fine. I can give them something. But when they're actually committed, because there's one degree of commitment, and that is total. There is no in between. You are either 100% committed or you are not. And the human mind is designed to do moderation zero. We are not meant to do moderation. We say we are, but we're not. That's why a person who smokes, they're better off just cutting out cigarettes entirely, cold turkey. Because if they allow even a little bit of nicotine in their body, they will elongate the amount of suffering that they're doing in the process, and they will always want that. And that sucks. And it's free. Do it. Do the work, but that's difficult.
Right.
But one of the things I could tell people is, I talk about my TEDx talk. I've heard people call it, first world shaming, and telling me that that's what it is, and they've come at me sideways about how can you call adversity a gift? And I just say, well, if you get it, you get it. And if you don't, maybe you will later. But understand that right now where we are, there are millions of people who would love to have the things that we're complaining about. Yeah. That's one way to look at it. But if that is too full frontal, then think of it like this. I call it the adversity scale. So at the very top of the piece of paper is a 10. At the bottom of the piece of paper is a 0. At 10, that's your adversity scale. That's yours. So whatever the hardest thing you've ever done in your life or ever been through psychologically or emotionally or spiritually or financially, that's your 10. Because adversity is not a competition. It's relative. A lot of people will make it a competition. Man, I'm having a bad day, blah, 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 blah. Oh yeah, well, let me tell you about my day. And then and now they want to one up you, right? And you're not winning anything. Yeah. Again, that's where that victim mentality comes in. But if you look at the hardest thing you've ever had to encounter in your life at a 10, so for me, it's being dead and being paralyzed. And then I actually look at what I'm complaining about. It's maybe a 4, if I'm really honest. And by writing it down, or at least even thinking of it like that, it takes the emotion out of it. Because now it's pragmatic, it's logic, because emotions assassinate the truth. And people don't think about that. Again, it's easy to be philosophical, but when it's our problem now, it's like, whoa, because there's emotions involved, and it's us, and it's our proximity. Yeah. Now, well, that all bets are off. Yeah. That's the idea. So if you can look at it on a piece of paper and say, okay, I'm pissed off at this guy for cutting me off in line, but compared to what I've been through, I can probably go through a lot more. Yeah. And by doing that, it takes the emotion out of it. And now you're not being judged either. It's just like, it's very black and white. Here it is. Is it that bad? No, it's not. Okay. So what do we do now? Yeah.
Dispassion. It's a number.
That's one way to do it for sure. And that helps you understand it. And then I talk about something that's called, it's a perception of adversity scale, but it's basically a cycle. And what happens is people look at adversity in one of two ways. They look at it in this cycle or this cycle. And they either say, adversity is a hardship. I don't like hardship. I try to avoid hardship. This puts me into a place where I feel like I'm a victim, where I hesitate, where I don't take any action. And then they're at the very top of the scale again, and then adversity hits again, and it just corroborates that belief. But if adversity comes over here and you say, this is an opportunity, this is a chance, this is a litmus test for me to better myself, this is my catalyst to move forward if I so choose. Now you start to crave it, and you start saying, well, even if I get beat by it, quote unquote, if I at least attempt it, I'm getting closer than I was. Yeah. So if you put 100 pounds on a barbell and say, I'm going to get 10 reps with that, that's fine. But if you're like, I think I can only get 3 or 4, there's a difference in perception. Mm-hmm. So even if you attempt the 10, not knowing if you can get it or not, even if you get 7, that mental follow through, that intention, that commitment to go through the adversity gets you much further than you thought you would have initially. Then you're like, I thought I could only get 3 or 4. I've got like 7. I can get 10 next time. Mm-hmm. And so becomes the resilience, so becomes the strength. They call weightlifting resistance training because you're literally training yourself to resist, and you get stronger from it. Mm-hmm. Now we have to allow ourselves the chance to adapt, just like a tan or just like a blister on our hand. But if you allow yourself to do that, and you can temper yourself within the fire of adversity enough times at a pace that you can actually keep up with, that's when you get better. So there are micro adversities every single day that you can find. And that micro adversity could be something as simple as walking a block further than you would normally, or taking the stairs into the escalator, or giving some money to a homeless person when you were going to go buy yourself a soda or whatever you're going to do. Something simple like that, because that builds in that resilience.
Yeah, the micro adversity is something I wanted to hit on. So if people are bought in and they're like, I want this, is micro adversity something to just throw in whenever? Or do you have a specific timing, or should you do it every day?
You should do it every day. And people talk about doing gratitude, and I absolutely think that's very important. But one of the ways that you can do microadversity is there's microadversity in all things. You can choose to do it. Mm-hmm. You can even do it with the temperature in your home. Yeah. Whatever you're comfortable with, make it not that.
Yeah.
And again, if it's walking, or if it's maybe even watching TV, watching somebody from a completely different political slant. Mm-hmm. Just to see, it's like, why is this pissing me off so much? Why do I not like this person? Why do I not like what they're talking about? Yeah. And now that makes you self-examine, and it makes you understand that they're coming from a different viewpoint, but then it makes you also understand, well, why do I think like that? Mm. Why am I so threatened by them saying that? Yeah. Or am I threatened by it?
Right. Which now, you would never know if you didn't bother to take the time.
That's it. And you can unravel that, and you can turn that off and turn it on however you need to. Mm-hmm. And then at night, when people are brushing their teeth, I have them think about one thing that day that was a hardship that they overcame. Mm-hmm. And it can be simple. There are people that I've worked with that are like depressed to the point where just getting out of bed was a win. Yeah. So that person, if they can brush their teeth and say, I got out of bed today, that is their micro adversity. That's their win. And what that does is that corroborates the belief that they can overcome it. Mm-hmm. That strengthens them. And that helps them see, wow, I got out of bed yesterday. I can probably get out of bed today. I can probably get out of bed today and actually walk outside. Mm-hmm. And then it's baby steps, baby adversities, more and more, compound, just like interest in any kind of investment. Yeah. And that's what we have to do. We just have to continually make those deposits, because if you don't, it trickles away. And that's why, for better or for worse, pain and discomfort are the best teachers. Mm-hmm. And they don't pull any punches. They don't care about our emotions, but that's not their job.
Right. What do you say? Adversity hates you?
It absolutely does. It shows up unannounced at the most inopportune times, without apology. It doesn't give a damn about what you want. It doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't take no for an answer.
Right. And like a worthy opponent.
That's it. And that's what you want. If you want to improve, you don't want an opponent who's easy. Yeah. You learn nothing from a win. Nothing. Yeah. If you get knocked out, you're like, boy, I got a lot of work. But that's how you learn. Right. And that's why you have to keep your hand up. And that's why it's easy to see it. When somebody else is doing something wrong, when you see a friend who's in a bad relationship, you and I are over here, it's like, man, I can't believe he's doing that. Why is he doing that? Because we're not in the ring. Right. We're not in the arena. There's nothing at stake. We're not committed. There's no skin in the game. There's no adrenaline. There's no fear. There's no love. There's no emotion. Mm-hmm. Emotion assassinates the truth. It all comes together. So understanding that there are opportunities within all those if we decide to look at it. And adversity hates a part of us, but the only part of us that it hates is the weak part. Mm-hmm. So if we can see the opportunity within that and not look at it as this oppressive thing, and look at this as basically a very, very rigid teacher, we will learn for the rest of our lives.
Nice. Marcus, if people want to learn more from you, where should they look for you online?
They can find me at marcusaureliusanderson.com, or find me on that handle everywhere: LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Marcus Aurelius Anderson. Please reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, Marcus, I have one final question. Mm-hmm. How can a leader create a team that thrives in adversity?
They all have to go through the fire of adversity together, because that breeds the most camaraderie. And then they have to continually go at it together. They have to know what the plan is. They have to know the direction they're going. They have to know what they're supposed to be doing within that plan. And then they have to be willing to do the work. I've got a quick story. When my book was coming out, it got pushed up 2 weeks. I had an editor and I had a photographer, and I was like, listen, I have 2 days to get 2 weeks worth of work done now. And they said, okay. So I go through the process, and I'm like just trimming all the fat on this book, and I'm doing all right. But then when I get to like the 24th, 25th, 26th hour, like my cognition is crazy. I can't get to the point where I'm doing anything. And I'm literally at the place where I want to give up. And we're all war rooming in the office. So, and I sent the girls home. I was like, just go. I'll keep working on this. And then when they come back, they can see that I'm frazzled. And they basically told me, they said, listen, just lay down for a little bit. Just lay on the couch, get a couple hours sleep. We're going to keep working, because my editor kept working diligently. Lacey French, she just kept working. My photographer, Rachel Williams, kept giving me concepts for the book cover, concepts for the release, concepts for all the other stuff. And then when I woke up, they'd already been doing more work. And then because they knew the vision, because they trusted me, because they believed in what I was doing, because you can't pay somebody enough money to believe in what you believe. Yeah. They have to be bought in already. Mm-hmm. And then by teaching them or leading them, telling them what I wanted to do, even whenever I was giving up, they were able to kind of nudge me and say, get back on track. Mm. They never said it like that, but they were like, we know how important this is. We know that we have to hit this deadline. And there are people waiting for this book. So they were able to help me get through that hardship. And I'm the leader, right? So if you do the right thing, and if you lead by the right example, and if you have empathy and you actually care about your people, guess what? They'll do the same thing to you. And that's what leadership is.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, Marcus, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. This was great.
Thank you so much for having me. This was incredible. All right. I really appreciate it. It's been fantastic.